We're back with our eighth socially distant studio visit for Hallwalls. And today, our special guest is Charlie Clough, who is an American painter and founder of Hallwalls. And we're very happy that he could join us from his studio in East Aurora, New York. And Charlie, my first question to you, as to everyone else at this time, is how are you? How are you doing? How is the family doing?
Hi, John. Hi, everybody. I'm fine. My family's fine. Feel very lucky that way. And I wear the gloves. I wear the mask. There's certainly the desire to go hang out with the relatives. I mean, friends are, miss the friends, but the distance with the relatives sucks. But we could be suffering more.
Yeah, I mean, you have grandkids that you probably haven't seen in a little while now.
FaceTime.
Yeah.
Thank goodness for FaceTime.
Yeah. We are, as much as we complain about social media and technology, we are a little bit fortunate at this moment that we have that means and methodology to stay in touch.
Yeah. Miracle of modern technology, just like us right now.
I wanted to harken back. I always, when I'm giving talks at Hallwalls to different students, which I do a lot, and I have to explain the origin of Hallwalls, I often quote or paraphrase something that you said way back when you and Robert Longo were thinking of putting together this organization. And among the questions you were asking was, how do you become a part of the larger culture? And your answer was, well, you just make a culture, and then you are the culture, and then you belong to the culture. And that certainly was a big part of Hallwalls' origin, as with many other similar places. With that creation of culture and the maintenance of that culture to this day has relied very heavily on the congregation of people being in physical spaces together, of chatting with each other.
That's the word.
And I wondered if you had thoughts about the effect of our current moment on what you and I and everyone in the arts has relied upon for so long as the heartbeat of our, culture.
The Birchfield Center show, In the Fullness of Time, gave me this perspective of 150 years of painting in Western New York. And lately, I've been reflecting on the past, because I'm coming up on 50 years, and thinking about the ethos that Hallwalls was part of, and I'm trying to put my finger on it, like Whole Earth Catalog, or I'm not even sure. I mean, the sort of art world rhetoric at that point, artist space, a space. Did I ever read anything that they said, well, here's what we're going to do? I probably did, but I can't put my finger on it right now. But I'm caught up in this, failures of institutions through the last 50 years, and how the congregation that you mentioned formed around Hallwalls. And the thing is, Hallwalls, like, carved out of Ashford Hollow Foundation. Hallwalls couldn't have happened without Ashford Hollow Foundation, or Media Studies, or the Albright. There were all these kind of swirling institutional bits that turned into a situation where a congregation would gather. And it blows my mind that there are like 1,000 paid members for Hallwalls. Do I understand that?
Yeah, correctly? Roughly that, yeah.
that's really wild. And is there a way for an institution like that to segue into the future, in a positive way in relation to all the bullshit that's going on? Um, and I find myself here at the Roycroft with this tradition of progressivism, head, heart, and hand, and Hubbard was for suffrage and for equal rights and for empowerment of the workers. And, being at the sort of 50-year mark, I'm like thinking about what I've done and how what I've done has been a critique of, say, my parents, or say the culture of the 1950s and 60s that I grew up within, and how that mixes in with 100 years ago on the Roycroft campus. I mean, it's weird. It's like there's a hauntedness going on, and it's like, my parents' property abuts the campus here. There's this whole like, holy shit, am I mourning like for 5 years, like that my parents died? I mean, I'm not, like they were cool and stuff, but I'm not like that attached to them. But on the other hand, thinking, what did they represent institutionally? How did I got a sense of like church and school and Museum of Science and Scouts, and like there were these institutions that sort of bounced my head into Hallwalls. And how, what are the linkages in there to make that happen? It's like I'm, uh, these introspective times, sort of take you into off on tangents into cul-de-sacs, and I guess that's where I am. But
Well, it's funny you use the word institution, because sometimes people say, well, Hallwalls is an institution because we've been around for 45 years, and it's true. And yet, this comes up in our staff meetings, we often discuss the fact that, yeah, we're an institution, but we want to avoid being institutional. And there's a difference between those two things. There's this desire to remain nimble and open and, somewhat spontaneous within certain planning parameters that we do anyways, but still somewhat open and spontaneous within that, and diverse in our programming and approach. And so it's funny you bring up the word institution, because it's something that bounces around in curious
well,
ways.
it is. I mean, it just plain is, and how it sort of like snuck in, like next to the museum on the one hand, and academia on the other hand, and there were those. Buffalo Society of Artists and Pateran Society and so on that were kind of out there. Were they institutions, or were they like clubs, or but how Hallwalls can be nimble and sensitive to the to circumstances, and sensitive in a way that is progressive. I mean, what is progressive? It's something, and I think that the openness to art, new art, it's like, how does the belief system work? I think it's really interesting, because where does fiction, how do you invent your own life, kind of a thing? Like, where's that borderline between fact and fiction? And take that to another step institutionally, like fact or fiction. Here's what the institution represents. Does that make any sense?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. you're sitting there in East Aurora at the Roycroft, and I know that normally you would be having people, individuals, families, groups come in to work
Paintings.
on the seasonal Clough paintings. And I know that's probably something that's not going on right now. So what are you spending your time on creatively?
It's really disappointing that the public painting workshop is stopped. And I had thought about it as a clock, in the way that it sort of regulates my time. Like I'm on site like noon to 5 daily. Unless I'm go to New York for a week every few months or whatever, and so like that's changed, and that's a it there's some slight pain to that. What I'm doing is, like I mentioned, a kind of a review of. In the fall, I kind of worked to a point of looking back at the 5 years that I've been in residence at the Roycroft, and it's like I started renting a space because it was near where I was staying when I was in Western New York, and it grew, and it grew into two spaces, the ongoing painting workshop, and then library up into the Albert Hubbard's old office, and paintings into Hunter Hall. And it's like, this is really incredible. It's like, you read about residence program somewhere, and it's got all these like features, and sitting here right now, it's like I've just gone through this amazing residence program that resulted in two great big Clough Places paintings, 18 season paintings, over 300 numbers paintings, and 11 solo shows. I got notes here. The Guggenheim, 13 lectures, and like 20 publications. It's like, I got a lot of work done here. And so I'm looking back at those 5 years, and it's like punctuation has happened. How will I move forward? And I don't know, because this new economy is going to be really interesting. It was tough enough. I was building up to like a presentation in May where I like brag about my results, and then try to like make some more money, because it's like every once in a while I would make a little bit of money, and that would like keep the whole thing going. Guggenheim, that was big money. Thank you, Guggenheim. But now, like going forward, I don't know. I've got this archive here that I'm going through, finding cool Hallwalls, early papers, that I'll be handing over at some point when the fog lifts. But anyway, I'm getting old. I got to deal with this, my leftovers, and again in this review kind of mode, sort of squaring up what did I think I was doing 50 years ago with what do I think I did 40 years ago, and 30 years ago, and 20 years ago. And it's like I have these threads of the painting thread, the photography thread, the words thread, and what else? Oh, videos. I got a lot of videos that most of them I haven't watched. So, at any point within a 50-year range, you could kind of dig into the index and say, what was going on? And now all of it's in front of me here. And with this, something's come to an end. What will be starting up again? It's invigorating. It's frightening. It's I feel lucky I've gotten to be this age, and depending on how you read the bones, it's there have been successes, there have been failures, and it's a good thing. It's been a lot of fun.
When you consider different points along that 50-year thread, do you find uh, more things have changed during that time, or do you find more through lines that have remained consistent over time?
Well, there's what I do, that painting, photography, writing, videos, they will change, and in those categories they come at different rates. But then there's the external, my experience of the external, say, art world, which has sometimes changed gradually and sometimes changed abruptly. I think it has just changed very abruptly, in the last month. The, reading about the trouble the museums are having, and just general psychology. Nobody's going to be into buying art. It's like, from the mid 70s, when there was very little support of contemporary art, until last month, there was been this crazy rise of Koonsism and so on. And I think the people that would support that kind of thing have lost interest. And and the artists, or the people who get something besides what the billionaires got, we can continue to do that. I mean, thinking about when I came to the Roycroft, I was interested in this idea of a community art workshop, and that's what the painting workshop ended up being. And it was a way to integrate the public. I could have done more outreach, I guess, but I didn't have the budget for that. Anyway, there will always be art, unless it's extreme, concentration camp or refugee situations. You won't see art there. But even in less extreme circumstances, I think there'll be art, and there'll be a reason to do it. And whether it's crazy professional or simple childish, the work of a child, or the work of anybody that has that impulse, I think that's going to go on. And
well, I read a quote recently from Richard Prince, who said something to the effect that unless you break through and you become known in the mainstream, your audience is probably about 500 people.
Well, that's a lot. Yeah. And that's if I have that, I'm lucky. And they're the perks of that, simply being an artist, like you do stop and smell the roses. There is a lot that can be absorbed in, experientially, that makes that point of view fulfilling. And so I do recommend it, but it's not going to, the glory is hard to get.
Well, speaking of the long course of time, as you know, as all of us in the Buffalo art community know, gallerist Nina Freudenheim passed away this past weekend. And I believe, Hallwalls started in late 74, early 75. And I think within a year, Nina had opened her first gallery. So I know you've known her then for 4 decades or more. Do you have any thoughts, recollections, remembrances that you'd like to share with us about her?
Nina was great. She was truly a great person in the community. She was an enormous help for me, and I have great memories going to mid 70s, going to I think she had Les Crims as a first show, and I think I went to that opening, and it was spectacular and kind of for me in Buffalo, young person art opening. It was glamorous. I thought it was really cool, and then she paid attention to what I was doing and showed my work, and we had a relationship of like 30 years, and she got me the subway commission, and made some crucial sales when I would have been like evicted if she hadn't. So I was blessed to, sort of have a parallel career to Nina's, and my condolences to the family. And it's sort of like there was Bob Buck and Jerry O'Grady, people whose memorials I've been to in the last few years, and they really are pillars. And Larry Griffiths Jr., people who made a real difference in the community. And John and Shelley McHenry come to mind as people who are make a huge difference in the community. And it's exciting that they did what they did, and as examples, who's going to jump in there? I don't know, but leadership, and sort of the creativity into the imagination, into how can something work more interestingly. I forget how Gene Youngblood worded a memorial to Jerry O'Grady, but he, the idea was he was a truly righteous dude, and as close to a saint as you can in the secular world, and so Nina's in that mold, and added a really incredible magic to Western New York.
I was thinking about it, and I realized, I've only been in Buffalo since she's had the space at the Lenox Hotel, saw a lot of the shows there. And it occurred to me that I'm pretty sure I never walked into her gallery and the show wasn't good. Like, it was always good, which sounds like a small thing, but over the long course of time, that's not easy to accomplish. That consistency of excellence, and it really sort of speaks to how solid her eye was, how she knew art, and how she knew how it should look to you when you walked in. So I was always impressed by that as a curator, that there was never a show I thought was like mediocre or anything.
That happens with effort. I mean, she put in the legwork. She went to look at work, went to studios, and certainly there was something intuitive and native, as it were, but refined through all of the experience of doing what you have to do to become her, in terms of attention to the art world, and artwork, and that's cool. I mean, that was something, again, about like Buck or O'Grady, that they really knew the work, and how that sort of trickles down into cultural magic, but somehow it comes through trickle osmosis, whatever. But that kind of spirit of concern for the work and what the work could mean, in so many different ways, through culture to people.
Charlie, my last question, which is my last question to everyone, when whatever version of the new normal returns, what is the thing that you're not able to do right now, big or small, that you want to do first?
See the grandkids.
Good question. That's maybe what I would have anticipated. So that's a big hole for you.
It's yeah, well, they're thrilling. It's like a magical, the icing on the cake. So
Well, Charlie, thank you so much for taking some time in your studio today to talk to us. It's really great to see you as always. Hopefully this will, the curve will be flattened or crushed very soon, and I can come out to East Aurora and see you in person, because that's always a delight as well.
it's nice talking, John. It's nice being swept into the outside of the studio. So thanks.
All right. Thanks, Charlie.